Hello and welcome back to the Woodland, and in this particular woodland I do have my bushcraft shelter. Many of you would have seen it and been here with me on some overnighters, doing a few bushcraft things and generally just enjoying being out in the woods. It's a beautiful day. I enjoyed the cycle to get here, but there's just enough light. We're at that time of day where it's just going to start fading away, and it's really beautiful to be in here. There is a few shadows starting to be cast now, but I'm enjoying being out. I'm here for a particular purpose, and that is to do a bit of a review on this bushcraft shelter. It was this time last year the concept to build another shelter sort of like began to be floated, and then I went into the recce process to find a woodland, then find the location and then start the build. And yeah, it's been used ever since, and I have videos, like I said, of all this further back in my back catalogue. But yeah, I'm going to do a review, see how it's holding up, and then I'm going to give my thoughts and feelings on it. You know, was it worth building, the downside of it, the upside of it, and on top of that I'm going to possibly air some thoughts and feelings on bushcraft shelters in general. So yeah, I'm going to get a cup of coffee on the go, and then we'll start this conversation and look around. Right then, this woodland here was the one I selected out of checking out or recceing quite a few. My main requirement was to be brutally honest and straight to the fact. I didn't want a lot of human interaction. I didn't want a woodland that was going to see a lot of footfall, and that's a big ask in the UK, let alone down here in Cornwall. But I had found a one after a lot of painstaking searching, and I came here and recceed this woodland, and I found this location that we're at, and it is absolutely perfect. I am quite a way away from any human habitation like farms, houses and anything like that. It's a very vast woodland, and access is cut off to it from half, if not 3/4 of the perimeter of it by a very large river. So people aren't just wandering willy-nilly into this forest. So once I found this woodland, found the location that I was going to build, I then had to figure out the type of shelter that I was going to build. And I wanted something bigger than my previous one, which was kind of an upscaled survival shelter. A bit more than what you would for a typical one-man survival shelter. So I wanted something slightly bigger, which was this. And I also wanted to have a little bit of a feel for it, like a woodland feel, and something that looked a little bit more than what you see in a lot of woodlands where kids or adults have just piled a load of sticks up, thrown stuff on it, and that's a shelter. I wanted something semi-professional in between the, shall I use the word log cabin and bushcraft shelter type thing. I wanted something midway between that point, and I think I've achieved it. And yeah, it's proved extremely functional, and in a lot of respects, if you look at it and just squint, it does have kind of like a little bit of an old Viking longhouse type look, but miniaturized. I actually forgot my boiling vessel, so I'm boiling my water up in a ceramic mug, and I've got minimal heat on it. I'm just letting it boil up slowly. I don't know if the ceramic would take, being blasted by heat, but we got time to wait for that. But this is the area that I've built the shelter in. It's clearly denoted that I've got native forest over there. It's in quite poor condition actually, but it's still a lot of native trees there. You can see the difference, how tight and tangled it is. And the clear divide between it, you've got plantation here for commercial trees, as you can see all the way around me. And this is one of the few open areas within this sort of plantation, this part of the plantation, that had a small area that I could come and work and not have to worry about pioneer species like young trees, bracken, brambles, stinging nettles, and all the young growth, which would make it hard to build. This area was naturally, well, kind of bare. I do have a game trail which has, and it looks like it's been even more heavily used. I guess it's because I'm not here that much. As you can see, they're coming down here and going up through there, up into that tangled mess there. They could even be bedding down over there. But yeah, this is the rough area that I'm in, and I'll walk you around. I've got a fair bit of area to actually utilise. That's leftover building stuff which I use when I want a fire. It is actually off the ground enough, so most of it is being air dried. And this is the area that I basically call the base camp working area. I will, when the weather's poor, rig up some guidelines and put a floating tarp up there to give me a roof, and it keeps me dry here. So yeah, a fantastic area. And this is the actual bushcraft shelter, and like I said, it's been built in a manner which is semi-professional. It's not just logs and things like that resting. It has been built solidly using cordage that will rot away. It's biodegradable. It's not like paracord, which will stick around for ever and a day. This stuff will rot down eventually. So I've situated it so basically all the covered end takes the majority of the weather. Down here, most of our weather comes from the south, southwest and westerly directions, and that's pretty much how I've angled the main bit of the covered area. I do have a porch which is basically only really kind of like a wind stop, but I do have a tree blocking this bit here to a point, so I've got good kind of coverage which is stopping wind. Now, when I constructed it, I was planning on just using 3 of these X frames like this, and it'd be self-supporting. I very quickly realised that it wasn't going to have as much rigidity as what I wanted, because I knew it was going to have a fair little bit of weight in wood, because I was going to do it like I said, in a pretty decent building manner, so it needed to be able to take a bit of weight. That is why I've utilised this tree to give it a real good solid, I will use the word foundation. Obviously it's not going into the floor, but because it's lashed to the tree, and this tree ain't going nowhere, you can see this is solid. But basically I've got 3 of these X frames. I've actually got pegs going right the way through. It took a lot of time to do it that way, but I'm happy, and it seems to be working out. And because these pegs are swollen in there, there's not any movement. You can see that here again. There's where the X comes, and there's the peg. I wonder if you can see it around this side. You might be able to. Yes, and there you go. There's the X coming up, and there's the centre peg. I've got a big ridge pole running along the whole length, as you can see. And where it overshoots on the tree, that's where I've lashed it with loads of cordage. So it's not going anywhere, it's really secure. So on those X-frames and with the ridge pole installed, I was then able to go up from not a top to bottom, I was going up laterally up the side, and I was able to stack them on themselves as it went up the framework and tie every single one off. That's what I mean. Nothing's been put against it and lying against it. It is tied in and it's knitted together. I'll show you. I've got my torch. Every single log is resting on an X-frame, and as you can see, they're stacked close together and they're all bound to that pole. It's a completely solid and structure, and every piece is bound together. And if we go inside, I have brought a torch this time, you can see how tight all these logs are together. And because I've done that, I've been able to create this so that it's pretty rain resistant. Now in that far corner over there where the spotlight is, last time I did smell fox scat, and I can actually smell it in here now. So I think a fox is using this periodically, probably come just to rest. It's obviously not making this a den, because it can probably, you know, recognize that it is still being used. But when I'm not here, I think it's being used by a fox. I would like to have a trail cam actually, but anyway, let's go inside. There, that's where you could smell it. It's gone anyway now, gone now. Right, that there, I did leave it kind of a little bit blank because I wanted a bit of airflow in here, because I didn't want mold to develop. And I can already see where a bit of moss needs reinstating there. But as you can see, it's pretty solid. And there's a lot of room in here. Right, you can clearly see I've got a lot of room. You could bed 3 or 4 people in this, you know, very tight in this structure if the weather was poor. But I can see I need to do a bit of maintenance on it. It's done very well. It is holding up in here. It's just a bit of the moss on the outside has probably took a bit of, like, you know, storm damage. So I need to get that fixed. But it's really holding up really well in here. Yeah, so as you can see, like I said, it isn't a half-assed effort. It really has been made to last a while, or till it's discovered. Right, so this back wall was purposely not mossed, or no chinking was done, quite simply because I wanted some airflow to go through. I wanted enough of a screen to take the worst of the winter winds away, but I did need airflow through, because my experience with other bushcraft shelters that I've built quite simply is wet wood rots, you get mold and fungus growing on the inside if you don't have airflow. So this has worked out very well, and as you can see, this is solid. But it's not, you know, it's all doing its job. It's all braced and holding in, so I'm really pleased with this. Yeah, that's all doing its job. So what about the moss itself? It's alive. I can't explain. It's its own little world. I've got ferns, I've got clover, I've got different species of moss growing on it, I've got insects, I've got young shoots growing out of it where seeds have obviously landed in this. And you've got pioneer species starting to grow out of this here. It is actually alive. This shelter is actually a living structure. Now, I do need to fill in a few of the gaps. I'm not going to overdo it because quite simply I don't want to kill any of the moss that's already there. So I will go inside when I come to do any renovation. I will plot which area needs it and I'll readjust it and put some new in. Still leaving all this alive because, you know, we don't want to kill it if we don't have to. But I'll discuss how effective it's been in a moment. And it looks like this side here is the side that receives the most light because obviously, as you can see, it's the most vibrant. So it is a living structure in its own right, as I've just said. Let's see if this cup of tea is ready. Well, we finally got there in the end. And I don't have to stir it, look at that. Perhaps I will have to. There you go, frothy coffee. Whoop. Spillage. Right then, I did get there in the end. I've had to clean all my stove off because the spillage has gone all over it. Not one of my best ideas actually. I should be tipping it in while it was still boiling. But I do have coffee now. The thing is with moss will soak water up, but once it's soaked so much, it will then allow water to seep through. So the only way you could make that shower proof or light rain is basically have it at such a pitch that when it reaches near saturation, the water will then track down through the other moss and come out. If you have a shallow pitch, the water can't run so fast through the other moss, so it then comes through the shallow pitch. That is shower and very light rain proof. If it's heavy rain, it will saturate and still come through. The only way I can overcome that is if I possibly not just had moss but dug turf up somewhere and laid turf and then put moss so that the water could run right the way down through the turf. But then that would be making an even more permanent structure, and on top of that, digging, which is not what I want to do. So moss will stop light rain or showers. Heavy rain, it will still come through. So you have to bear that in mind. I do think that when you see people doing moss on YouTube, roofs or anything like that, and you see them starting from the top and going down, that's a big mistake in itself. You need to start from the bottom and go up. You layer it over each segment as you go up, almost like a tiled effect, so the water is running or cascading over. If it's butting up against one that you've just put, you know, below it like that, it will seep down through. It needs to sit, like I say, this, you've laid one bit of moss on the floor like that, the next bit you put on top so it overlaps. It has a hinge, basically using a tiling method, and for that you need to start at the bottom and then work up And when you get to the ridge pole, you select a big enough piece of moss to put on the ridge pole and let it overhang down onto where you've actually tiled up with your moss slabs. Like I said, that is working pretty well for as much as I want to use it. I've got no intention of coming here in downpours and storms. I'll leave that to the fox. For me, the most I ever want to experience is showers, and that will cope with it. Right, to build this, let's get straight to the point. It did take a lot of time. More so than what another structure of this size would take if you were just laying poles together. I've actually, like I said, spent time selecting and trying to get them to fit as best I can. And on top of that, I'm weaving and winding cordage around and pulling tight, basically to provide me with a strong structure, which it has done. But that's all taken time, and it's taken possibly 3 times longer than if it was just kind of like thrown up. This structure is not going to go anywhere through like wind or, you know, environmental conditions. The only way it's going to come down anytime soon is if it's discovered, vandalized, or taken down by basically whoever's managing this forest for lumber. So yeah, this has been built to last, but it's taken time, and I spent multiple days spending a few hours here, because that's all I could afford to put to this project. A few hours a day, and then having to move, you know, back out of this woodland and then come back in a few days time because I've got commitments elsewhere. But yeah, it did take time, but it was worth it. So from my point of view, this bushcraft shelter has been a success. Firstly, it hasn't been discovered. Secondly, that my construction methods have paid off and it's still as secure as when I built it. And thirdly, then it's provided me with overnight stays in this woodland. I've got an area to use as the base camp. And not only that, every time I come and see it, I do get a sense of satisfaction. And I did bring the kids here 2 weeks ago, even though that was a mission in itself. They wanted to come, but it's just getting into it. It was a full-on mission to get the kids here. They saw it and they thought it was fantastic, and I had to stop them actually climbing all over it because they were beginning to pull the moss off, but that's a separate story. But yeah, they did come here and they enjoyed it as well. It's a shame that I've built it in such a hard to reach and difficult location, because quite simply I don't think they've got any interest in trying to get here again. But yeah, for me it's been definitely worth building. So some of the negatives for me is basically the time I had to invest to build it and find this location. Not only that, it's difficult to get into, parking, and on top of that you've got to push through some, you know, in the winter it's not so bad, but this time of year it's starting to get to the point you have to push through ferns, and there's a lot of deers in here, so you're dealing with ticks. And I'm wearing shorts. That's another schoolboy error coming into the woods this time of year, but I'm going to have to work with it because I got no option now. But yeah, and then on top of that, the maintenance, as I've explained, I've still got to maintain it. And on top of that, if it does get discovered, basically it's going to be quite heartbreaking to know that all that effort's gone to waste. But you know, that's just part and parcel of the risk. Right, I'm going to have to keep moving because the midges have started coming out. The sun is dipping, and it's just cooled off enough, and with the lack of light, yeah, they're all out. So yeah, so for me it's been a big positive. I've had some wonderful experiences. I've even had my dogs with a dog bracken with me while I slept here overnight, and I've enjoyed using this bushcraft camp. But that's not to say that within the bushcraft community that bushcraft shelters as of this type are actually the go. A lot of people do not believe that anything like this should exist in the woodlands. They will say it doesn't fit with the leave no trace, and on top of that, you know, for the environmental reasons that they believe that, you know, that this here could be causing a problem. So by no means, just because I've built it and I'm enjoying it, would that be the same for another bushcrafter. They may actually find what I've done here as a little bit of a horror show, to be honest with you. Now, if you go to some woodlands, particularly in urban areas or woodlands that have access, readily easy access, you will find lots of shelters sporadically put up here, there and everywhere. And in some cases, they can actually become an eyesore, quite simply due to the volume and the haphazard nature that they've been, you know, thrown together. Now, there's a couple schools of thoughts on that. There's a school of thought, well, people are just entertaining themselves, or kids are putting some shelters up, so let them be. They're enjoying themselves, they're not up to it, or they're not doing any harm. And then there's that school of thought that, you know, if you go for a woodland walk, do you want to see half-hearted shelters just smashed up everywhere? Now, I can fully understand that, and particularly when these shelters have man-made materials brought into them as part of their construction, like tarps, plastic, you know, metal and things like that. Could you really argue that that shouldn't be in the woodland? The moss is alive, the wood is natural straight from the woodland itself. You know, it's all been selected as fallen or standing dead, or the wood itself is actually partially on its way rotted. I'm just recycling it. I did make another shelter which got took down by hunters, which I'm 99% sure of, and if you go back there now, the moss on it, which has carpeted the logs, pretty much looks like the ordinary forest floor now. When and if this comes down, whether it be by natural or man-made hands, that will go back to the forest floor in no time at all. Even the cordage is the only thing really man-made there, and that's biodegradable cordage, and within, you know, a year or two that would be totally rotted away. In fact, I can see some of the cordage now is suffering environmental damage on it, so that may need, you know, rectifying. Everything about my shelter there can go back to the environment exactly where it's sat. And in this woodland in particular, there are no other people and no other shelters. So what about leave no trace? And I firmly believe in that. I don't leave no trace of anything man-made or anything rubbish left behind. The only thing that's here is the offcuts of wood, like I said, and it's all natural. Got a midge in the eye. Yeah, it's all natural, and I've got no intention of bringing anything in that can't be taken out. So the leave no trace thing doesn't really bother me, because if somebody was to find this, I'm sure they would probably, you know, if they weren't here to destroy it, would have a little bit of amusement and fun, you know, using it, using the chairs, and may even take this on as their base camp as well. Now, what about the environment and wildlife? Well, I've got a game trail or deer trail only about 3 or 4 feet from my actual shelter, just over there that I showed you. And in fact, I've been in here and I've heard them using it while I've been in the shelter. It hasn't deterred them. And like I said, a fox is using the shelter to bed down periodically, obviously not when I'm here. But yeah, there's insects in there. The moss is all alive. It's a fully organic structure, living structure in its own right. And like I said, when it does collapse, it will go back to the environment and indeed nourish and feed this ground. But as for the woodland itself, this woodland here is reaching the end of its natural life. These trees are at their perfect size to be logged, and indeed some of them, like this one, look like they're well overdue. Most of these forests are usually on a rotation of between 40, if it's really prime growing woodland, to 80 years. This type of woodland will be harvested. So where I'm stood now, possibly within my lifetime, I would say these will be rotated to be taken out and replanted. And there's evidence only possibly 400 meters down there I can see markings on trees. So how much longer this piece of woodland will stay like this, I don't know. It will be clear cut, turned over and replanted. We won't have to worry about that shelter then, because it'll be gone straight back to the ground where it all came from. Now, I don't build in deciduous or natural woodlands, quite simply because that is where most of the British wildlife chooses to reside and feed. These woodlands are great places for, you know, animals to, well, use to escape the humans and bed down for the night, but they're almost like monocultures. They're almost like a desert within the British countryside, these woodlands here. Yes, they do provide some subsistence, but nothing to the quantity and the amount that the native deciduous trees and woodlands provide. So I do have my own rules, or set of rules. I won't build in deciduous woodlands. I will tarp there, put a tarp up and leave. But I'm building in woodlands that are due to be clear cut or taken down anyway. And like I said, that's going to have no effect on the environment in here. So then, if I come to a woodland and I found, you know, there were loads of structures, even if they were half-hearted attempts as I've discussed, that would be an instant no-no for me anyway. And like I said, in this woodland, which is acres and acres and acres, I don't know, it's huge. In some respects, it goes on for miles. I wouldn't build or consider building in one which has things like that. Not only because of people around, because I would genuinely feel that it was too heavily used and subscribed to kind of like shelter building. There is a point you naturally look at an area and you think, no more, and I'm not going to add to it. But this might be the only shelter for miles around where I am. So if this camp got compromised or destroyed by environmental reasons or man-made, would I build another one? Well, more than likely, or you know, being sensible, no, I would not build one in this location. Would I choose to build one somewhere else? At this given point in time, with the amount of projects I got going on, I possibly couldn't allocate the time that I did, like I did on this one, to build one for the moment. In the future I may want to build another one, but while this one is still standing, I do have a lot of things that I want to do here and some more overnighters. So I'm hoping it stays not discovered and still in one piece, that I can at least squeeze a little bit more time and well, experiences here at this bushcraft camp. And if it all comes to an end for whatever reason, like I said, I will probably use my tarps and find a new area that I can make a tarp camp out of. So the time here for me at the moment is all the more precious, because I don't foresee myself having spare time to make something like this in the future at the moment. So on a personal note, you may be thinking, well, my two young boys might like to use this more regularly, and I'm kind of doing them a disservice by building it in such a remote place. Well, like I said, I did bring them here. It was a bit of a mission. They enjoyed it. They loved playing around, but it was, for young lads, quite a mission for them to get here. I'm going to be doing some camp outs in the garden, and I'm basically slowly getting my kids used to the idea of camping and the slight uncomfortableness of doing so in a location that, if it all starts to go south, I can quickly just round them up and take them back indoors. But I'm gradually going to start pushing them to the outdoors lifestyle, but I'm going to do it slowly. I've learned the hard way that pushing kids in a certain direction, guide them by all means, give them instruction, but forcing young kids or young adults to do something sometimes backfires on you, and they choose a different path or different way. But for me, yeah, I will gradually start bringing my kids into the outdoors environment. But this here is possibly just that step a bit too far for two young boys at the minute, and most of that is down to the fact I've built it in a pretty remote location. So yeah, I hope that allays some fears from people about me and my bushcraft shelter, or how I choose and where I choose to actually build them. Like I said, I do have my own set of rules, or a bar that I try to stick to, or do stick to. And indeed, a woodland that is a private woodland by a private landowner, you know, I won't build in there. These woodlands that I'm building in are commercial enterprises, which, you know, all this is going, everything behind me is going, and it's at that size it's going. It will be completely leveled. I've already covered this, I know, but leveled, and it'll be replanted. So I'm not interrupting any cycle within the environment here. And, you know, because, like I said, it's a large organization that owns this here, I kind of morally don't feel too bad just putting up a shelter and spending a night or two here. But like I said, if it was a small private individual owning a bit of woodland, nah, I wouldn't be putting shelters up there. That's, you know, that's not my style of shelter building, to do that.